Deuteronomy chapter 28. وهايا إمشى تشمع بقول يهوه إلهك لشمر לעשות את כל מצוותיו אתר אנוכי מצווך היום ונתנך יהוה אלוהיך עליון על כל גויי הארץ. And it shall be, if hearingly thou shouldst hear by means of the voice of Yahweh thy God, to keep, to effectuate all his commands, which I am one commanding thee today, also Yahweh thy God shall give thee most high over all the nations of the earth. ובאו עליך כל הברכות האלה והשיגוך. And all these blessings shall come upon thee and shall overtake thee, כי תשמע בקול יהוה אלוהיך, because thou hast listened by the voice of Yahweh thy God. Baruch atah ba'ir, blessed shalt thou be in the city. Baruch atah b'shada, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Baruch peri v'tnecha, uperi adamataka, uperi behemetaka. Blessed the fruit of thy belly, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy animal. Shigar halapeka wa ashtarot toneka. The offspring of thy oxen, and the increase of thy flock. Baruch tanecha wa misharateka. Blessed thy basket and thy kneading trough. Baruch atah b'voecha, u'baruch atah b'shetecha. Blessed art thou in thy coming, and blessed art thou in thy going out. Yiten Yahweh oyevecha hakamim alecha nigafim lefanecha. Yahweh shall give thy enemies, the ones rising up against thee, to be smitten before thy faces. B'derech echad yeshu eloka, u'b'shiva adarachim yanusu lefanecha. In one way they shall come out to thee, and in 7 ways they shall flee from before thy faces. Yisrael Yahweh itaka et habaraka bahasameka ubekol mishalahayadaka. Yahweh shall command with thee the blessing in thy barn and in all the sending forth of thy hand. Weverakaka barish atar Yahweh Eloheka noten lach. And he shall bless thee in the land which Yahweh thy God is one giving to thee. Yaqimaka Yahweh lo la'am kadosh. Yahweh shall cause thee to stand for him for a holy people. Katar nishba'alach, like what he swore himself to thee. Ki tishamora et mitzvot Yahweh Eloheka. Because thou art keeping the commands of Yahweh thy God, and thou art walking in his ways. Warahu kol amme ha'arish, ki shem Yahweh niqrah aleka, wayarahu mimmecha, and all the peoples of the earth shall see that the name of Yahweh is called upon thee, and they shall fear from thee. Ohotirka Yahweh l'tova, and Yahweh shall make thee plenteous for good. Bifari vitnaka, ubifari behamataka, ubifari adamataka, in the fruit of thy belly, and in the fruit of thy animal, and in the fruit of thy ground. على هذا ما أترنش بعيه ولا وتقى لا تتلاك, upon the ground which Yahweh hath sworn himself to thy fathers to give to thee. Yifetah Yahweh lecha et otharo hatov et hashamayim. Yahweh shall open for thee his storehouse, his good storehouse, the skies. La to give the rain of thy land in its time. Ulevarek et kol ma'ashe yadeka, and to bless all the work of thy hand. V'hilawita goyim rabbim, v'hata lo tilawa, and thou shalt lend to many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. Unatataka Yahweh l'rosh v'lo l'zanav, and Yahweh shall give thee for a head and not for a tail. V'hayita rak l'ma'ala v'lo tihye l'mata, and thou shalt be only to going up, and thou shalt not be to descending. Ki tishma et mistawot Yahweh Eloheka atrahano ki mistawaka hayom lishmor v'la'ashot, because thou art listening to the commands of Yahweh thy God, which I am one commanding thee today, to keep and to do. ולא תאסור מכל הדברים אתרהנו כי מצווה אתכם היום ימין ושמאל ללכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים לעובדם, and thou shalt not turn aside from all the words which I am one commanding you today, right or left, to go after other gods to serve them. وَهَيَا إِمَ إِلَهِ تِشْمَعْ بِقَوْلِ يَهْوَهِ إِلَهِكَ لِشْمَرَ لَعَشَوْتَ את כל מצוותיו וחוקותיו אתרהנו כי מצווך היום ובאו עליך כל הקללות האלה והשיגוך. And it shall be, if thou art not listening by means of the voice of Yahweh thy God, to keep, to effectuate all his commands and his statutes which I am one commanding thee today, also all these curses shall come upon thee, and they shall overtake thee. Arur hatta ba'ir, cursed thou shalt be in the city. Waharur hatta bashad, and cursed thou art in the field. Arur tanaka umishaharataka, cursed is thy basket and thy kneading trough. Arur perivitanaka uperi hadamataka, cursed the fruit of thy belly and the fruit of thy ground. Shagar halapaka wa ashtarot tohnaka, the youngling of thy oxen and the produce of thy flock, that is, the increase of thy flock. Arura hatta baboeka, cursed art thou in thy coming. Warura hatta basheteka, and cursed art thou in thy going out. Yishallah Yahweh baka etaham mahera, etaham huma, wa etaham migeret. B'kol mishalah yadaka atar ta'ashu. Yahweh shall send out against thee the cursing, the discomfiture, and the rebuke in every sending of thy hand which thou effectuate. Ada hishamadaka wa ada habadaka maher mipnero ma'alalaka atar azabatani, until thy destruction and until thy perishing quickly from before the faces of the evil of thy doings, which thou hast forsaken me. Yadabeka Yahweh et hadaber. Yahweh shall cause the pestilence to cling to thee, adakallototaka, until his finishing thee. Me alahadama atrahatabahthama lurithata, from over the ground which thou art coming there to possess it. Yakaha Yahweh basha hefeth, wavaqadahat, wavadaleket, wavaharahur, wavaherb, wavashidapon, wavayarakon, urdapuka, adhobdaka. Yahweh shall smite thee by means of the wasting disease, and by means of the fever, and by means of the inflammation, and by means of extreme heat, and by means of sword, and by means of blasting, and by means of mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thy perishing. وهايوشامك أطر على رشك نحوشت, and thy skies which are over thy head shall be bronze. وهارش أطر تحتك barzel, and the earth which is under thee iron. يتن يهوه اتمت أرهرشك آباق وآفار. Yahweh shall give the rain of thy land dust and powder. Minahashamayim yered alaka adahishamadak. From the skies it shall descend upon thee until thy destruction. Yittanaka Yahweh nigaf lipanehoyavaka. Yahweh shall give thee smitten before the faces of thy enemies. B'derka ehadate shehelayu, ubeshiva adarachim tanus lefanayu. In one way thou shalt go out to him, and in 7 ways thou shalt flee before his faces. Wahayita lezawa lekol mamalekot harish, and thou shalt be for tossing to and fro, or for a horror for all the kingdoms of the earth. Wahayita nivelataka lemahakal, and thy corpse shall be for food. Lekol opa hashamayim ulebehemataharich, to every bird of the skies and to the animal of the land. When maharid, and there is not one frightening away. Yakaka Yahweh bishehin Mithraim, Yahweh shall smite thee with the boil of Mithraim, Uvathorim, Uvagarab, Ubeharis, and by the hemorrhoids or tumors and by the itch, and by the eruptive disease, which thou art not being able to be healed from. Yakakaya wabishigaon ube Yahweh shall smite thee by means of madness and by means of blindness, ubetimahon levab, and by astonishment of heart. Wahayita mamashesh bathoraim katar yamashesh ha'ewer bafela, and thou shalt be one groping about in the noontime, like how the blind man is groping in the darkness. And thou shalt not prosper thy ways. Wahayita aka ashuk wagazul kol hayamim when Moshe, and thou shalt be only oppressed and robbed all the days, and there is not one delivering. Ithataharesh Wiisha acher yishakabana baitativana wilohate kermatita wilohatahallalenu. A woman thou shalt betroth, and another man shall lie with her. A house thou shalt build, and thou shalt not dwell in it. A vineyard thou shalt plant, and thou shalt not use its fruit, or begin using it. Thoraka tavuh le'enaka velohetohekala mimenu. Thy ox shall be slaughtered before thy eyes, and thou shalt not eat from it. Hamoraka gazul milapanaka velohiyathu velak. Thy donkey shall be stolen from before thy faces, and it shall not return to thee. Sohanaka natunim lohoyavaka wenalaka Moshe. Thy flock shall be given ones to thy enemies, and there is not for thee one saving. Banaka hubenotaka natunim la'am acher ve'enaka roth uchalot halehem kol hayom ve'en lehel yadaka. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given ones to another people, and thy eyes seeing and failing upon them all the day, and there is not for God thy hand. Peri adamataka ukol yegi'aka yokala ataralohyada ata. The fruit of thy ground and all thy labor, a people which thou hast not known shall eat. Wahayita raqa ashuk warathuth kol hayamim, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed all the days. Wahayita mashugga, and thou shalt be one maddened. Mimmara enaka ataratirah, from the seeing of thy eyes, which thou shalt see. Yakaka Yahweh, Yahweh shall strike thee, bishehin ra, with an evil boil, ala habirakaim wa ala hashokaim, upon the knees and upon the thighs, Atar loh tukal leherafe, which thou art not being able to be healed from. Mikaparagulaka wa adkodkodaka, from the sole of thy feet and unto thy crown. Yolech Yahwehotaka, وإت ملكك أترتا قيمة عالك الجوي أتر لوه يادعتا أتا وهبوتك. Yahweh shall cause thee to walk, and thy king which thou settest up over thee, to a nation which thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers. ועבדת them Elohim acherim eshwaben, and thou shalt serve there other gods, wood and stone. Wahayita l'shama l'mashal u'lishanina b'kol ha'amim ataryanahagaka Yahweh, and thou shalt be for an astonishment, for a proverb, and for a hissing or a taunt in all the peoples where Yahweh shall lead thee there. Zer'a Rab Toshi Hashada Uma'at Tehsof Ki Yahsalenu Harba, abundant seed thou shalt bring out to the field, and a little thou shalt gather, because the locust shall consume it. Karamim tita wa'avadata, vineyards thou shalt plant, and thou shalt serve them. Wa'yayin aloha tishata v'aloha tehagor, ki tohakalenu hatola'at, and wine thou shalt not drink, and thou shalt not gather, for the worm shall eat it. Zetim yihiyu laka b'kol gavulaka, v'shemen eloh tasuk, ki yishalazetaka. Olives, olive trees, shall be for thee in all thy border, and thou shalt not anoint with oil, because thy olive tree shall throw its fruit. Banim wabanot tolid, thou shalt beget sons and daughters. Ki bashabi, and they shall not be for thee, because they shall go into the captivity. Kol eshaka wapari hadamataka yareth hasalasal. All thy tree and the fruit of thy ground the locust shall possess. Hager atrabikarbaka ya'ala alaka ma'ala ma'ala. The sojourner which is in thy midst shall ascend over thee, and ascending, Wahata tered mata mata, and thou shalt descend, descending. Hu yalawaka wahata lo talawenu, he shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. Hu rosh, he shall be for a head. Wahata zanab, and thou shalt be for a tail. Wavahu alaka kol hakala lot haele uradafuka wahishiguka adahishamadak. And all these curses shall come, and they shall pursue thee, and they shall overtake thee until thy destruction. כי לא שמעת בקול יהוה אלוהיך לשמור מצוותיו וחוקותיו אשר ציווך. Because thou hast not heeded by means of the voice of Yahweh thy God to keep his commands and his statutes which he commanded thee. Wahayu b'kalot u'lemofet u'b'zara'aka ad olam, and they shall be among thee for a sign and for a wonder, and among thy seed until unseen time. Tahat atar Elohe avadata et Yahweh Eloheka b'shimecha u'b'tuv levav merob kol. Because of that thou didst not serve Yahweh thy God in joy and in goodness of heart, in the abundance of everything. ועבדת את אויביך אשר ישלחנו יהוה בך ברעב ובצמא ובערום ובחוסר כל. Therefore thou shalt serve thy enemy, which Yahweh shall send against thee in the famine, and in the thirst, and in nakedness, and in lack of everything. ונתן עול ברזל על צווארך עד השמידו אותך. And he shall give a yoke of iron upon thy neck until his destroying thee. Yeshaya wa'alaka goy merahok mikasheharish katar yideh hanasher. Yahweh shall lift upon thee a nation from afar, from the end of the earth, like that the eagle flieth. Goya atar Elohe tishema l'shono, a nation which thou canst not hear or understand its tongue. Goya al zapanim, a nation fierce of faces. Atar Elohe yeshapanim l'daqen v'nachar lo yahon, which shall not honor the faces for an old one, and a lad it shall not mercy. Wakala peri behementaka uperi adamataka adahishamadak ataraloh yashir lakadakan tirosh wiyithahar shigar halapaka wa ashatarot thonaka adahavido otak. And it shall eat the fruit of thy animal and the fruit of thy ground until thy destruction, that it shall not be left for thee grain, or new wine, or oil, the increase of thy ox, or the increase of thy flock, until his destroying thee. And he shall besiege toward thee in all thy gates. Adredet homoteka hagavohot habthurot atrahata bot ehbahen bekol harshaka, until the coming down of thy high and fortified walls, which thou art trusting in them in all thy land. And he shall besiege for thee in all thy gates. Atranatan Yahweh Eloheka lak in all thy land, which Yahweh thy God hath given to thee. Wakalata parivitnaka, Basharabanaka, Ubenotaka, Atranatan Yahweh Eloheka, Bemathor, Ubemathok. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thy belly, the flesh of thy sons and thy daughters, which Yahweh thy God hath given to thee, in the siege and in the distress which thy enemy shall distress thee. Haisha harakabaka wehe'anogamod, the man, the one tender among thee, and the one delicate exceedingly, tera eno ba'achiu, ubeyet de heko, ubeyet de banayu, atrayotir. His eye shall be evil against his brother, and against the woman of his bosom, and against the rest of his sons which remain, which he causeth to remain. Mitetel ahad mehem mibasharabanai atrayokel mibeli hishehir lokol, from to give to one from them, from the flesh of his sons, which he is eating, from there not being anything remaining for him. B'mathor u'b'mathok atrayatik leka o yivaka b'kol tharaka, in the siege and in the distress which thy enemy shall distress thee in all thy gates. Harakabuka wahaanuga atralohanisata kaparagalah haseg alaharish mehita anneg wemerok, the tender one among thee, and the delicate, which would not test the sole of her foot to set upon the ground from being dainty and from tenderness. Tera'enah b'yisheheqah u'bibanah u'bibitah. Her eye shall be evil against the man of her bosom, and against her son, and against her daughter. Uvashilayatah hayosheth mibin ragaleha uvavanaha atrateled kitohakalim bahosarakol basatar. And in her afterbirth, or the one coming out from between her feet, and against her sons which she is bearing, because she shall eat them in lack of everything in the secret place. B'mathor u'b'mathok atrayathiq leka oyivaka bitharaka, in the siege and in the distress which thy enemy shall distress thee with in thy gates. Imelo tishamor la'ashot et kol divrei haTorah hadot hakatuvim basefer hadeh. If thou keep not to effectuate all the words of this directive, this law, the things written in this book. Le'yirah et Hashem hanikbad v'hanorah hadeh et Yahweh Elohecha, to fear the name, the glorious and the terrifying name, this glorious and terrifying name, even Yahweh thy God. V'hiplah Yahweh et makoteka, v'et makot zara'eka. Then Yahweh shall make wonderful thy plagues and the plagues of thy seed. Makot gedolot v'nehemanot v'halayim ra'im v'nehemanim. Great plagues and abiding, and evil sicknesses and abiding. V'heti b'baka et kol madawei Mitzrayim atar yagorta mipnehem v'daveku bak. And he shall bring among thee all the disease of Mizraim, or every disease of Mizraim, which thou art fearing from before them, and they shall cling among thee. Gam kol holi v'kol makkah atar lo hakatuv b'sefer haTorah hadot. Also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, Ya'alem Yahweh aleka, Yahweh shall bring them up upon thee, ad hishamadak, until thy destruction. V'nisharatem bimetem at, tahat atar hayitem, kekokaveh hashamayim la rob. And ye shall remain but few in number. Instead of that, ye were as the stars of the skies for abundance. Ki lo shama'ata b'kol Yahweh Elohecha, because thou hast not heeded by means of the voice of Yahweh thy God. Wahaya katrashasha Yahweh alechem lehetiv etechem uleharabot etechem. And it shall be as Yahweh delighted over you to do you good and to multiply you. Ken yashisha Yahweh alechem lehabid etechem ulehashmid etechem. Thus Yahweh shall rejoice over you to cause you to be destroyed and to destroy you. V'nisahatem me'al ha'adama, and ye shall be torn away from over the ground. Atrahatabahama l'rithatah, which thou art coming to there to possess it. V'hapithaka Yahweh b'kol ha'amim b'qaseh ha'arish v'adqaseh ha'arish. And Yahweh shall scatter thee among all the peoples, from the end of the earth and unto the end of the earth. Va'avadata tham Elohim acherim atar lo yada'ata hata wahavoteka eshawaben. And thou shalt serve there other gods which thou hast not known, thou and thy fathers, wood and stone. Uvagoyim hahem Elohe targi'eh, Elohe yihye manoch lekaparaglecha. And among those nations thou shalt not find repose, and there shall not be a resting place for the sole of thy foot. ونعطنا ولك ثامل برقاز وكليون عينيم وذهبون نافش. And Yahweh shall give to thee there a heart of trembling, and annihilation or pining of eyes, and fainting of soul. وهايو حيك تلويم لك من نجد. And thy life shall be hanging for thee before thee. وفاحدتا ليلى ويومام ولوه تامين بحيك. And thou shalt fear night and day, and thou shalt not trust in thy life. ببكر تهمر ميت غرب. In the morning thou shalt say, who would give evening? وبغرب تهمر ميت بوكر. And in the evening thou shalt say, who would give morning? مبحث لبابك أطرتفحاد. From the fear of thy heart, which thou art fearing. ومن عينك أطرترها. And from the sights of thy eyes, which thou art seeing. وهثيبك يهوى مصريم بهنيوت. And Yahweh shall return thee to Mizraim in the ships. بدرك أطرها مرتي لك لوه توصيف عود لروتاه. By means of the way which I have said to thee, thou shalt not add any longer to see it. وهتمكرتم ثام لهويبك لعباديم والشفاحوت وإن قونا. And there ye shall sell yourselves to thy enemies for servants and for maidservants, and there is not one buying.